My full name is Margaret Holloway. I am 66 years old, and for 43 of those years, I was married to a man named Charles Holloway. He was a veterinarian, a quiet fixer of broken bones, and, for a long time, the center of my world. We lived in Vermont's three-story Victorian farmhouse set between two rolling hills and 5 acres of pine woodland. We brought up 3 sons together. I've never been the loudest member of my family. Charles had the voice, the clients, and the community's esteem. I had the calendars, the invoices, and the homemade meals that fed both lads and hired workers. While he patched wounds and delivered calves, I operated the house like a machine, invisible but necessary. Charles died 9 weeks ago. Charles passed away from stage 4 pancreatic cancer 9 weeks ago. We barely had time to comprehend it. He was one moment tending a neighbor's injured dog, and the next he was withering in a hospice bed, muttering apologies through a morphine fog. And now I am here, alone. I thought so. Grief has a curious way of causing you to reach for the familiar. So I did what I had always done on Mondays for the preceding 2 decades. I cleaned Charles' study. This is when I discovered the folder. It was hidden beneath a rack of veterinary journals and labeled simply Succession Plan. I opened it expecting to find retirement statements or donation ledgers. Instead, I discovered 2-year-old transfer documents listing our eldest son, Brian, as the major beneficiary of the business, land, and the house. The property is not jointly owned. There is no shared ownership of this. Only Charles signed this. Brian arrived the following morning, carrying a briefcase. These are not flowers. He didn't inquire about my performance. All I had was a briefcase and a rehearsed smile. "Mom," he added, "I thought this would be a good moment to discuss next measures. I've already spoken with a real estate consultant. A buyer has expressed interest in the acreage behind the barn. We may shrink you into something more bearable." The buyer expressed interest in something more practical. It felt like my entire adult life had been chaotic. He continued to chat. Market rates, he was making the most of Charles' legacy. Regarding how transitions were handled more rapidly when I was younger. I simply stood there, listening. I didn't even blink. I did not decline. I didn't yell. I prepared tea. While he was reviewing maps and contracts on the kitchen island, I glanced at the mug in my hand. It belonged to Charles, the one who said, "Trust is earned." And I realized I wasn't sure if I had earned it or if he had. That night, when the house was quiet, I entered Charles' locked filing cabinet with the spare key he kept in his winter boot. I dug until I found the deed to our land. It also did not have my name on it. I am not even a co-owner. It is only his. Just his. I wasn't heartbroken. I awoke. My 3 sons returned home the following week. Brian delivered the paperwork. Mark, the middle one, brought his fiancée, a Connecticut real estate broker. Daniel, my youngest, remained silent. When he came, he made very little eye contact. Only a soft hug and a tired, "Hi, Mom." They claimed to have come to assist me in resolving issues, but by the second night it was obvious what help really meant. Charles' study, a place I had meticulously cleaned every Monday for 43 years, was the venue for their convening. The door wasn't closed, but the voices were low, clipped, and tense. Easement on the South Acre is a problem if she contests. Split the veterinary practice and lease it under a new name, maybe keep her on a stipend. Does she even know she's not on the title? I stood outside that room for about 10 minutes, carrying a tray of coffee cups that I had made out of habit. None of them came to help. Not one of them called me in. I eventually turned and put the untouched tray back in the kitchen. That night, I gave Claire a call. Claire and I had been friends since we were 16 years old, before Charles, the boys, and even before the house had reliable plumbing. She noticed the first ring. "Something's not right," I said. She asked no questions. She only said, "Come over." I did. I pulled out the duplicate of the property deed I'd made at the courthouse that afternoon at Claire's kitchen table, while her husband pretended not to hear from the living room. She had read it. He then looked at me. "Margaret, your name does not appear on any of these. That home is not legally yours. The same is true for the clinic. Likewise, the land remains unclaimed." "I know. And the boys?" "They do." We sat in silence for a minute, the refrigerator hum louder than it should have been. Then Claire inquired, "Do you want to fight?" I looked down at my hands, which had pruned rose bushes, bandaged Bruce's knees, and now they shook slightly as I held a cup of tea. "I want what's mine," I declared. "No, not out of spite, but out of the truth." Claire gave a slow nod. "Then let's get to work." I didn't run out of the house. I did not yell or threaten. That wasn't my style. Instead, the next morning, I cooked breakfast as usual, eggs, toast, and bacon, and presented it to my sons, saying nothing about what I'd overheard. I gave a smile. I inquired about Mark's wedding plans, Daniel's employment, and Brian's newest award from a corporate board I'd never heard of. They had no suspicions whatsoever. They assumed I was the same quiet, submissive woman who had always remained in the background. But in reality, I was already 6 steps ahead. That afternoon, I went to the town clerk's office and pulled every land record related to the Holloway property. I had to show my ID twice. The woman behind the counter inquired whether I was looking for something specific. I answered, yes, myself. By 3 p.m., I knew everything. Almost 3 years ago, Charles transferred ownership of the house, the practice, and all of the surrounding land to a trust, with Brian serving as trustee. What was the date? I cared for Charles just 2 months after he recovered from a heart attack. Charles did not utter a single word. It's just a pen and a line through my name. That night, I slept on the sunroom couch, which faced the backyard, where Charles and I used to watch deer graze on the apple trees. I clasped the documents to my chest. It wasn't out of fear. I gathered my strength. The following day, I went to see Martha Chen, a retired probate lawyer who now teaches legal literacy at the senior center. We weren't very close, but she respected me. I brought her some muffins. She raised an eyebrow as she read the trust paperwork. "Did you consent to this?" "No." "Did you contribute financially to the house and the practice?" I erupted into laughter. "I kept them alive." She gave a nod. "That'll do." For the following 10 days, we worked silently. Martha drafted a petition challenging the trust. She drafted an affidavit outlining the years I contributed to the household and business. Claire discovered old receipts for property renovations issued in my name. And I filed a second civil case seeking something I never expected to need: equitable interest. See, I wasn't concerned about money. I was concerned about erasure. They did not only take the house, they left me out of my story. So I started writing myself back in, line by line, page by page. The guys continued to have no suspicions. In fact, 2 days before the court filing, Brian approached me with a smile and said, "Mom, we're considering naming the new wellness center after Dad. The Holloway Center for Rural Renewal. Doesn't it sound lovely?" I grinned, wrapped the dish towel around the oven handle, and said, "It does, but you might want to hold off on the signs." He gave a blink. I blinked again, and then I realized he didn't recognize me anymore. This was his error. Wyndham's courthouse wasn't very grand. It featured 2 levels, a single judge, and a parking area adorned with maple trees. But that morning, as I entered through its glass doors with Martha by my side, It felt like a cathedral, a place where something precious could finally be restored. The boys had no idea I had filed anything, not until they'd been served. Brian made the initial call, 4 missed calls followed by a text. "What is this? Why are you doing this to us?" Then Mark, "Can we have a conversation before this situation escalates?" I did not respond. I was not doing this to them. I was doing this for me. 3 suited men who had shared a bathtub sat at one table in the courtroom. My sons. They are now strangers. I sat alongside Martha and her aide. My hands did not quiver. My voice did not crack. When the judge, a woman in her 60s with gentle but piercing eyes, asked if I had anything to say before the hearing began, I stood up. No one asked me. No one consulted me. But I was never absent. Over the course of 43 years, I worked tirelessly, provided meals, balanced books, restored barns, and reached out to clients whenever Charles forgot. I did not build a business or a house. I built a life. The room was silent. Brian attempted to argue. Charles said he wanted to protect me. This trust was designed to streamline the estate. I had no legal claim. The judge tilted her head. And yet, she was listed on the mortgage, contributed to improvements, and has had her name on tax returns for 2 decades. That offers her an equal interest. Mark leaned forward and whispered something to Brian. Daniel did not speak at all, just look at me. He gave me a meaningful look. When we went to lunch, I saw him standing outside the courtroom steps. "Mom," he responded, "I didn't know." "I believe you," I responded. "I should have inquired more. I should have." "You were in grief. So was I. But you did not try to sell the house before the funeral lilies withered." He looked down. "They were mistaken." "I know. I do not want the land. I just want you to be okay." That was the first time any of my sons uttered something that felt genuine. When court reopened, the judge issued an injunction prohibiting any estate action until the trust was probed. She recognized adequate evidence of potential undue influence, conflict of interest, and exclusion of a married spouse. In short, I was back in the picture. She did not regard me as a mere guest. I was once again the owner. I felt like I was someone who truly mattered. That night, I sat on Claire's porch, drinking my first glass of wine in months. The stars twinkled above us, and the wind smelled like hay and home. Claire raised a glass, to be underestimated. I clinked mine against hers, to being unerasable. 3 weeks after the hearing, the winds altered. Not literally. Vermont in the fall always smells like wood smoke and aging leaves, but something in the air altered. The energy, the silence, the respect. The developer backed out. It turns out that investing in land involved in a family lawsuit with public sympathy leaning toward the widow was not exactly a wise decision. Mark's fiancée ended their relationship in a gentle and decisive manner. I heard she got a job in Denver. And Brian, well, he never returned to the house. But Daniel did. He arrived one Saturday morning wearing a flannel shirt that didn't quite fit and boots that still had city dust on them. He held a paper bag. "Coffee," he said. "Not the kind Brian prefers. You used to enjoy a different kind of coffee. Dark roast, real cream." We did not chat much. I just sat on the porch and watched the orchard behind the barn move in the wind. Despite years of neglect, some of the trees were still producing fruit. Stubborn things. "I want to help," he explained. I looked at him. "Help what?" "The orchard, the land, you." I didn't respond, but I did not say nay. That was sufficient. A month later, the court publicly acknowledged my equitable interest in the property. The property included half of the house. The court recognized my equitable interest in half of the land, legally, officially, indisputably. However, it was not about the acreage. It was about avoiding obliteration. I opted not to move back into the main house. The house was haunted by numerous ghosts. Too many memories are linked to carpets, creaky stairs, and corridors that echo names no longer spoken. Instead, I had a modest guest house on the outskirts of the property restored. 1 bedroom. The guest house featured a wooden stove for warmth. The porch provided a stunning view of the hills. That was mine. For the first time in my life, I actually feel like I belong. I planted sunflowers. I began teaching quilting again at the local Grange Hall. We held a canning workshop at the library. I even joined a Facebook community for ladies over 60 to start over. You would be astonished at how many of us there are. I became visible for the first time in years. I would occasionally see Brian's name in the newspaper. Brian had secured a new job. Brian was appointed to a board. A minor scandal involving insider trading once occurred, but the claims remained unproven. We have not spoken since the court proceedings concluded, and that's fine. Sometimes peace is not about reconciliation. It's all about releasing. I retained the last letter Charles ever sent to me. It was short. He scribbled in unsteady handwriting in the margins of a crossword puzzle book he kept at his hospice bedside. It stated, "You deserve more credit. I knew. I apologize for not fixing it sooner. See." I didn't cry when reading it. I smiled. Charles didn't need to fix it for me. I corrected it myself. To anyone listening, anyone who has been written out of their own life, anyone who has been told they are too old, too soft, or too late, let me tell you something. The moment you realize your worth is not the time they give it to you. It's the time to take it back, quietly, steadily, completely. I am Margaret Holloway, and I was never simply a wife. I was never just a mother. Never be a shadow in someone else's story. I was and still am an author of my own.